On Prat. So ask leave of the community, give some Dhamma reflections. We've got about 3 weeks left to the winter retreat, and looks like springtime is approaching, so the seasons are changing, the year is changing as it always has, as it does, it's just what nature does. And this evening, to start at least, I thought I would talk about something that us monks just seem to can't stop talking about, which is suffering, dukkha. So it's springtime, we want to be happy, and flowers are coming out. We want to be able to sit down and mindfully drink a cup of tea and experience some sort of bliss. Dukkha, there's dukkha, but there's dukkha in the heart, so we might be floating on a cloud of bliss, and then when that cloud of bliss evaporates, we fall hard, and there's dukkha. And so we just keep coming back to dukkha. And it's not about trying to make people depressed or keep people from being happy. We want people to be happy. And we have mudita, like rejoicing or sympathetic joy when people are happy. But there's this issue of dukkha in the heart, and if it continues to go unaddressed, then it'll just keep being there. And the Buddha likened this to if monk goes and has skill in samadhi and goes to live alone somewhere, and he likened it to a swelling that's like a cancer. And this was actually in the Ajahn Chah reading the other day, that but when we're off in samadhi, we don't know it's there. We can't feel the pain yet, but there's something growing inside, there's a swelling, and so we need to address that. We can't just ignore it. And the way to the ending of dukkha isn't to ignore dukkha. And the way to the ending of dukkha isn't to run away from dukkha. And the way to the ending of dukkha isn't to distract ourselves from dukkha, but it's to look directly at it, address it, acknowledge it, understand it, see through it, know it. And so it's there in the heart, and we just have to look at that. So winter retreat is a wonderful time to look at dukkha. We might have ideas that coming into the winter retreat in the beginning, I can't wait to absorb into samadhi for 3 months and just be in bliss. And it just never works like that. We're always then butting up against dukkha again in various ways. And this is what's truly keeping us from really being at ease, really being calm. And the Buddha even going to the extent of talking about that if we're not careful, even things like the jhanas are something that people can fall away from, so they're not yet a perfectly stable refuge. So there's this story of the monk Chitta, is Chitta Hati Sariputta, and he ordained 7 times, and at some time during his 6th ordination, he attained the jhanas, and he was really excited about it. And he sort of wants to sit in with the Arhat elders and talk about his jhana with them. And it's Mahakotita heading up a Dhamma discussion, and this monk Chitta keeps interrupting them. He's super enthusiastic and super excited that he's attained the jhanas, and he keeps interrupting the elders and wants to kind of take over the discussion because he's so excited. And then Mahakotita, he stops and says, "Look, you don't have a firm basis yet. You could fall away from this." And then Venerable Chitta's buddies are sitting there too. They're like, "Venerable Mahakotita, don't say this. He's perfectly capable of engaging in a Dhamma discussion with the great elders. Look at him. He's bright. He's radiant." And then Mahakotita goes into giving a discourse about the drawbacks of attaching to the states of samadhi. And then sure enough, soon after that, Chitta disrobes again. And but then it's also interesting that then the monks go to the Buddha and they're kind of like, "Oh, the monk Chitta disrobed again," and they're kind of maybe wanting the Buddha to a little bit, they're kind of criticizing Chitta, and seems like they kind of want the Buddha to agree with their criticisms. But then the Buddha says, well, he can always renounce again. He can still come back. And then sure enough, he does ordain for a 7th time, and then he attains arhatship. So anything could happen there. But it's a really fascinating story. So it kind of illustrates how we can get lost in these things. But also, if we do get lost, it's not the end of the story. We can always see it later. But we can always correct ourselves. And that's really the important thing, I think. The fact that we can make mistakes, we can correct ourselves, and that's really how we're going to see it. So during winter retreat, we can have interesting experiences, and maybe a month ago or something, I had this one morning where I was having this kind of dream where it was like images that were being shown to me, which was like all the times I'd been criticized or ridiculed, or a lot of the dukkha I'd experienced in my life, and it was so painful, and it woke me up. It was so painful. I woke up at like 1 a.m. or something, and it was like any sort of self-conscious, sort of unhappy with myself type thoughts built up through a lifetime. And it was all like rolled into a ball and being shown to me. And when I woke up and was laying there, it was so painful, and it was just so kind of like, you could just feel it in the heart, how kind of painful it was. And I had this thought like, how can I possibly face the next day, having experienced this just now. But then the practice came and kicked in, and then it was like, okay, this is dukkha. There's this really, really strong pain in the mind, in the heart, and coming back to the feeling of it, and then doing some meditation, investigating, and seeing, okay, this is really dukkha. And then it subsided, it passed, but it was a very interesting experience. And dukkha kind of, it can lead to insight in that way, in terms of just showing us what's hidden there. It's almost, the analogy that came up to me after that was kind of like, it's like we immerse the heart in this like very strong medicinal liquid that's like being in the monastery, taking on the precepts and meditation, sila, samadhi, panya. And then sometimes the accretions on the heart, they get dissolved off to the point where it exposes these raw areas. And then when the medicine touches these raw areas, it stings really bad. And so that was kind of analogy that came to mind from that experience. And these things are, I feel these things are always there, but they're uncovered by the practice. So really precious opportunity to be able to see these things. A lot of the time when we uncover dukkha like this, there is a tendency just to want to run away from the practice. And it happens if we normally are someone who is naturally talented or doesn't make mistakes very often, then seeing things that we've done that were mistakes or that were wrong or failures in our life can be devastating. And then we build up the sense of denial, not wanting to look at it. But then there's the barami that comes up, the courage to just look directly at it and say, okay, what can I learn from that? So I guess that leads kind of into talking about refuge, because that's really the true refuge isn't to hide from dukkha, but it's to go into it, go right through it, see it clearly. So that's the buddho, that's the knowing. Dhammo is like the way things are, the truth of the way things are. Sankho, that's the virtue, but the internal virtue, not just the taking of precepts, but the internal integrity, the compass, the moral compass, the being able to differentiate right and wrong. And then as we see dukkha, we start to see, oh, what's the cause of that? Is it something outside, someone outside, some situation outside, or is it something that's happening inside that is there something I can do about it? If we always think our sense of dissatisfaction or that feeling of not quite right, if we think it's always coming from some sort of situation outside of ourselves, then of course there's not much we can do about it other than attack or protest that situation, thinking that it'll somehow lessen our sense of dissatisfaction. Or we can bring it back to the internal, the habits that we have, the unwholesome habits, the mental habits. That's why the Buddha talked about kamma. So based on our own good and bad actions, we have the happiness and suffering. So we do have a say in the matter, and we can start to see, and it's really difficult to see without the framework of the Buddha's teaching, the framework of the Four Noble Truths, like we chanted this evening. Really kind of amazing that the Buddha came to that through his own wisdom, his own discernment, that the cause of dukkha is tanha, is the craving, the kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, so the craving for sensuality, for the sense realm, craving to be, become, exist, craving to not be, craving to be annihilated. It's like waking up from that dukkha dream. It's kind of like, I just don't want to exist. I don't want to be. Don't want to be here. And yet, even that is dukkha. That craving is dukkha. That vibhava tanha is dukkha. That not wanting to be. Usually that's the kind of reaction, isn't it? It's kind of like, okay, let's just be done with this. Let's end it. Let's make it be over. That's the craving to not be, craving for nothingness. So that's also not quite right. So the Buddha teaching that craving for sense realm, sensuality is a mistake. Craving for becoming is a mistake. Craving to not be is a mistake. We learn from those mistakes and try to come back to the center, back to a sense of balance. And it's not like we judge ourselves for these things, because in the end, a judgment of ourselves or a criticism of ourselves based on having these cravings, again, it falls right back into that same cycle, into the vibhava tanha. That's the same function is taking place, and it's so getting hard on ourselves, judging ourselves, feeling guilty for having defilements. That's again the same generator, the same dukkha generator that's functioning. So then we get into this sense of stepping back and trying to sort these things out, trying to see it clearly, trying to know it clearly. And we can't just wipe it out of existence with an act of will, but we can step back, we can know, we can investigate. It's a really essential point to come back to the knowing and investigating the dukkha. And it comes up in the suttas. Sometimes we can read into it a bit. Sometimes like a thought of sensuality arises. One annihilates it, gets rid of it, destroys it, makes it not manifest. We have to be careful because it's easy to hold that in the wrong way and then get stuck in the vibhava tanha, the craving to not become. And then it just keeps generating the dukkha in other ways. Or if we try to destroy defilements in the wrong way, it can actually empower them and make them have more power than they actually have. So when we're looking at the mind, looking at the dukkha, then there's also other suttas where the Buddha says, one knows how a sensual thought arises, one knows how a sensual thought ceases, and one knows what kind of causes caused that sensual thought to arise for oneself. One knows what kind of causes caused that sensual thought to cease for oneself. One becomes skilled in knowing one's own tendencies, one's own habits. So that kind of sutta, I really like that because that's more pointing to it's different for each person. And so we need to try a lot of different angles, and it's not like we need to change the practices that we're doing. If we're doing Buddho, we can stay with Buddho. If we're doing Anapanasati, we can stay with Anapanasati, with watching the in and out breath. We don't have to change that up a lot, but within those practices we can change the angle quite a bit. So if we're using Buddho as a mantra, then we can keep doing that, but we can also have a sense of knowing or a sense of investigation while we're reciting Buddho in our mind. And we can look in a different angle in terms of trying to look and see where am I slipping up, or why is there still dukkha there? Where am I deficient in the practice? What's still need to be done? What kind of hindrances are present? This is part and parcel of sati, of mindfulness as well. This is also the fourth foundation of mindfulness in the Satipatthana. So there can be some confusion around this. It's translated obliquely as mindfulness of mental qualities. And so the third foundation being mindfulness of mind, fourth foundation being mindfulness of mental qualities. But then that's kind of vague and not so clear what it means. But then if you look at the sutta, read the actual sutta, and then the Buddha says you know where you're at in terms of the 5 hindrances, know where you're at in terms of the Four Noble Truths, 7 factors of awakening. He goes through these sets of dhammas. So that's like, the way I see that is like bringing up these sets of dhammas into the mind. So as an example of how to do that in the practice, say we're meditating and we're using Buddho, and the mind calms down a little bit and we feel comfortable, and then bringing up the 5 hindrances. Okay, can I check myself in terms of sensuality, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor? Is it present or not? And if so, in what level is it present? In what mode is it present? Restlessness and remorse. So like, if there's any restlessness present, then how does that come to be? What's the cause of that? Why did that happen? How have I been using my sense bases? What have I been allowing into the eye? What have I been allowing into the ear? What have I been allowing into the nose, tongue, body, mind? So the sense impressions, those are connected. Those are connected with the hindrances. I remember feeling at my wit's end, living at Wat Pah one time, and feeling like, is this practice even possible? Just feeling like the mind was just like a storm, going to Luang Por Liam and kind of complaining and saying, is this even possible? And then he said, Ben Bai Dai, like, it's possible. And then he said, I said, well, how is it possible? And And then he gave this basic kind of exposition on the 6 sense bases. And he said, he's kind of like, you could hear him sigh, like, ah. When the eye sees forms, there's contact. Ear hears sounds, there's contact in the ear. And he gave this kind of wisdom, 6 sense bases, kind of super basic, like sutta teaching. And it was so wonderful because it's just the way he sees things. It's the way he operates in the world. It's like the eye and forms, the ear and sounds, the nose and odors, the tongue and taste, the body and tactile sensations, the mind and mind objects. That's it. That's the world. That's our experience. And based on that experience, then we have happiness and suffering, joy and sadness, lots of different ways. The Buddha said this in Pali, like there's not just dukkha and sukha, but then there's like somanasa, domanasa. He has lots of different words for these emotions, for these moods. And then just the fact that it can cease, it can come to an end. Something that Longpa Pasano likes to teach over the years, I glommed onto this as something he would bring up over and over again, is that with the cessation of dukkha, one of the problems is a lot of the time when it ceases, the cessation of dukkha is not an experience that we're expecting. So a lot of the time when dukkha does cease, we don't realize it. And so that's why in the Third Noble Truth, the cessation of dukkha, the Buddha said, there is the cessation of dukkha. The cessation of dukkha is to be realized. So we need to actually notice it, actually see it. When it ceases, like, okay, dukkha was there, now dukkha is absent. We might have upekkha, like equanimity. And acquiring a taste for that experience, getting to know that experience. We always want it to be kind of really exciting or really ascetic or really extreme in some way. But the cessation of dukkha is just something super ordinary. And had a Q&A with Ajahn Nyaniko a couple days ago, and he said the most impressive thing, the thing that impressed him most about Longpa Liam is how normal he was. So with most Thais and a lot of us Westerners too, we come into the monastery thinking we want to learn about psychic powers and how to get really strong blessing power and blessings, and want to see heaven and hell and know about our past lives. And with Longpa Liam, there's just none of that. It's just completely, it's just like this normal person who doesn't have any problems. But actually, that's not normal. Actually, not having problems is not normal. But it's like the ultimate normality, someone who doesn't have any problems. And I remember another monk who was really having a rough time at Wat Nanachad asking Longpa Liam, well, didn't the Buddha suffer? You know, we go through all this suffering. Didn't the Buddha suffer after his awakening? And Longpa Liam said something like, no, he didn't have any problems anymore. And then there's the path, and there's these interesting suttas where the Buddha says, like, I'll teach you the right way and the wrong way, or I'll teach you the correct way and the mistaken way. So it's like there is such a thing as mistaken view, mistaken thought, mistaken speech, mistaken action, mistaken livelihood, effort which is mistaken, which is wrong. There's mindfulness which is mistaken. There's samadhi, there's concentration which is wrong or mistaken, misunderstood, not done in the correct way. Then there's the correct view, the right view, correct thought, correct speech, correct action, correct livelihood, correct effort, correct mindfulness, correct samadhi, establishment of the mind. And so that points to, it's not just about sitting there and letting everything happen, and that's the path. And again, something Lumpur Pasana would say a lot is water flows downhill, so if we don't do anything about it, the mind is just going to flow downhill. So we do have to do something about it. We do have to restrain ourselves and perfect our sila and our action and actually put effort into the practice. So even just that thought, it's possible to put it into dukkha. That's right view. If we thought it wasn't possible, that's mistaken view, that's an incorrect view. But that it is possible, that's part of mundane right view, that it is possible. There are ascetics and Brahmins who have seen and known for themselves arhatship, liberation, full liberation. Right thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-harming, non-ill will, or on a positive, you look at it a positive way, loving kindness, compassion, goodwill. When we talk about renunciation, that's specifically a renunciation of sensuality, but it's not like a vibhava tanha style renunciation. It's more like seeing the drawback of sensuality type renunciation. It's a natural type of renunciation, something that's in line with the nature of the way things are, the way things really are, not the way things that ignorance is telling us they are. It sees the drawback. In speech, it's easy to use wrong speech when we have a lack of mindfulness. A lot of the difficult, a lot of the dukkha we might experience, it could be around things we've said that we regret, or speech that was directed at us, which was critical, maybe true, maybe not. Speech can be very, very powerful and can be used for great benefit in terms of speaking about the teaching, speaking about the Dhamma, speaking words of encouragement. It can be very, very harmful in terms of harsh speech, speech that is not useful, or in the phrase of the sutta, speech which is rambling, useless, with devoid of meaning. So we end up, and I'm not free of that kind of speech, so I can speak from experience there, that has an effect on the mind, it has an effect on the meditation. So when our meditation is deficient or not going well in some way, then a lot of the time it's our conduct or our speech or what we've been watching on YouTube that affects the meditation. It's conjoined, not disjoined from the meditation. There's action which is right, action which is wrong. So focusing on the virtue, the way we use our body, the way we move through the world, the kind of effect we have on other beings, livelihood. Right, livelihood for the Sangha, for the monastics, is actually quite refined and very difficult to do perfectly. And it's really like a lifelong endeavor to try to perfect this sense of right livelihood. And it's defined as the alms round, or being alms mendicants, but it also, the Buddha goes into it in terms of the way we relate to offerings. And if we have right livelihood, then we live in a very, very pure, blameless way that tends to not be hurtful to other people. But then if it's not purified livelihood, then it's like hinting that we want offerings, we want certain offerings, or trying to shift and manipulate situations so that we get given what we like, or using, like, belittling somebody into giving you something, or seeking gain with gain in terms of giving gifts, like as a monastic, giving material gifts to the laity in order to, with the internal hope of receiving more, or receiving support, gaining a following, garnering support. The Buddha said that's going about it in the wrong way, so that's not a purified livelihood. But the purified livelihood is when one seeks alms food or seeks offerings in a completely blameless way, where with the attitude, if I get something, great, anumodana, and if I get nothing, I can make do without. And that's a pretty refined practice. That's pretty difficult to do. So these things take cultivation. There's the right effort, knowing the mental states. Right effort and right mindfulness, those really go together. Right view, right effort, right mindfulness, these circle and go around every other factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. So just knowing and taking a clear, honest assessment of what kind of things are going on in the mind and heart, and addressing them accordingly, using discernment to respond to them in the right way, and little by little, incrementally, getting the mind into more and more of a wholesome state, so that we just have a ground to stand on when the mind is wholesome. The wholesome mind and the unwholesome mind are just like, they're so different. When the mind is unwholesome, it's so much different than when the mind is wholesome. This is also when we talk about boon, merit. That's why we need to build up a store of merit for ourselves, because to make this holy life actually livable in the long term, we really need to have done so many good things, that we have to have performed so many good deeds, done so much generosity, done so much meditation practice, that it becomes more difficult for the mind to fall into an unwholesome state, and that it's then habitually in a wholesome state. And this is difficult. I know for myself, like, the mind tends towards the negative. If I do 10 positive things and one negative thing, my mind will focus on the negative thing. It's more difficult to focus on the positive things. So then using that right effort to retrain the mind to focus on the positive, even in exclusion to the negative, and there may be some negative thing that needs to be addressed about ourselves or whatever, but then giving ourselves energy so we don't sink too much, and looking at what we've done that's perhaps positive. And the right concentration, it's Ajahn Buddhadasa translated this as the firm establishing of the mind. So I like that translation better than concentration. So the firm sama samadhi being the right and firm establishing of the mind and of the heart. That it can take us through when there's moods, happy moods, sad moods, all sorts of different moods. The sama samadhi is what carries us through, kind of keeps us walking straight on the path without veering off too far to the left, too far to the right. Keeps us moving forward. So it's important to look at dukkha and not to try to run away from it, but to have that integrity to look at it and know the cause, know the cessation, know the path. That's really where the practice is. Again, like Luang Por Liam said, that there's just one way. There's only one real thing you can do with dukkha, and that's go right into it and go through it. And that's really what we're trying to do here. And just encouragement that if dukkha arises, that's not a bad thing. Again, there is this, I've seen it before, people have run away from the practice because of dukkha arising. Maybe they're extraordinarily good people, wholesome people who had this store of merit and perhaps didn't experience that much dukkha, and then dukkha arose, and it's like, okay, I didn't sign up for this. I'm out of here. But actually, that is what we signed up for. We just didn't realize it. So just the encouragement to use this time in the winter retreat to see these things more clearly. And it's like that medicinal liquid. It's really, really going to be for our benefit. It's not a bad thing to acknowledge these things and look at them, get to know them, but it more gives us a refuge, builds up the heart, makes us able to move forward with more of a sense of strength and integrity. And more of a sense of well-being, like a deeper sense of well-being, deeper sense of ease. It's not that dukkha is ended, but then we gain more and more power the more we're able to look at it. So those are just a few words of encouragement for this evening, and I hope everybody finds the benefits that can be found from moving deeper and deeper into the practice. So I'll leave it there.